Sarah Martinez stood barely 5 feet tall, her youthful face making her look more like a high school student than someone ready to serve her country. At 19, she walked into the military recruitment office in downtown Chicago, with determination burning in her dark eyes, though her hands trembled slightly as she filled out the paperwork. The recruiting sergeant, a burly man named Johnson, looked her up and down with obvious skepticism. Her small frame and soft-spoken manner didn't match the image of a soldier he was accustomed to seeing. When she mentioned wanting to join the infantry, he actually chuckled and suggested she consider administrative work instead. "Listen, kid," Johnson said, leaning back in his chair. "Combat zones aren't playgrounds. You sure you wouldn't prefer working with computers or maybe the medical corps?" Sarah's jaw tightened. She had heard this kind of doubt her entire life. Growing up in a rough neighborhood on Chicago's South Side, she had learned early that people often underestimated her because of her appearance. Her older brothers had been killed in gang violence, and she had watched her mother work 3 jobs, just to keep food on the table. "My family has served in every major conflict since World War II, she replied quietly but firmly. "My grandfather earned a Bronze Star in Vietnam. My uncle died in Iraq. This isn't about playing soldier, Sergeant. This is about serving something bigger than myself." The conviction in her voice caught Johnson off guard. Despite his reservations, he processed her paperwork and scheduled her for basic training at Fort Benning, Georgia. As she left the office that day, he shook his head, wondering if he was sending a lamb to slaughter. Sarah spent the next 3 months preparing physically and mentally. She ran 5 miles every morning before dawn, lifted weights at the local gym, and studied military history late into the night. Her mother worried constantly, but Sarah remained focused on her goal. When she arrived at Fort Benning, the drill instructors took one look at her and immediately singled her out. Staff Sergeant Williams, a tough veteran with 20 years of service, made it clear he didn't think she belonged there. "Martinez," he barked on the first day. "You lost, little girl? The Girl Scout camp is down the road." The other recruits laughed nervously, but Sarah stood straight and looked him directly in the eye. "No, Sergeant. I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." Basic training proved to be the most challenging experience of her life. The physical demands pushed her body to its limits, but she refused to quit. While larger recruits struggled with endurance, her compact frame and fierce determination helped her excel in areas others found difficult. During the obstacle course runs, she discovered she could navigate tight spaces and climb with an agility that surprised everyone. Her marksmanship scores were among the highest in her platoon, and her tactical thinking impressed even the skeptical instructors. One particularly grueling day during field exercises, a fellow recruit named Thompson collapsed from heat exhaustion during a 12-mile march. Despite carrying her own heavy pack, Sarah immediately moved to help, practically dragging the much larger man to safety while other recruits continued past them. Staff Sergeant Williams witnessed this act of selflessness and began to see Sarah in a different light. "Martinez," he called out that evening during inspection, "you might just surprise us all." As graduation approached, Sarah had not only survived basic training, but had earned the respect of her fellow soldiers. She graduated in the top 10% of her class and received orders to report to Fort Campbell, Kentucky, home of the 101st Airborne Division. Standing at the graduation ceremony, Sarah thought about all the people who had doubted her abilities. She knew this was just the beginning of her journey, but she had already proven that appearances could be deceiving. Her mother sat in the audience, tears streaming down her face, as she watched her youngest child accept her military insignia. Sarah had transformed from the uncertain young woman who had walked into the recruitment office months earlier into a confident soldier ready to serve her country. The drill instructors who had initially questioned her presence now spoke of her with genuine admiration. She had demonstrated that true strength came not from physical size, but from an unbreakable spirit and unwavering commitment to excellence. As she prepared to leave for her first assignment, Sarah reflected on the lessons she had learned. The military had taught her that leadership wasn't about commanding respect through intimidation, but earning it through actions and integrity. Her journey was just beginning, but she had already overcome the first major hurdle. The young woman, who had been dismissed as too small and inexperienced, had proven herself capable of meeting any challenge. Little did anyone know that this was merely the foundation for what would become one of the most remarkable military careers in modern history. The doubters had been silenced, at least for now, but Sarah knew that every new assignment would bring fresh skepticism. She was ready for whatever came next, armed with the knowledge that she had already defied the odds once and could do it again. The transport helicopter descended through the thick desert heat toward forward operating Base Falcon in Afghanistan. Sarah pressed her face against the small window, watching the barren landscape stretch endlessly below. After 18 months of advanced training and preparation, she was finally heading to her first combat deployment. Captain Brooks, her commanding officer, briefed the new arrivals as they settled into their temporary quarters. The 2010 surge had intensified operations throughout the region, and their unit would be conducting regular patrols in some of the most dangerous areas. "This isn't training anymore," Brooks emphasized, his weathered face serious. "The Taliban controls significant territory here, and they know these mountains better than we ever will. Stay alert, follow protocols, and watch each other's backs." Sarah's squad consisted of 8 soldiers, most of whom had at least one previous deployment. As the newest and youngest member, she felt the familiar weight of skeptical glances. Sergeant Rodriguez, the squad leader, seemed particularly doubtful about having her on his team. "Martinez, you stick close to Johnson and follow his lead," Rodriguez instructed during their first patrol briefing. "No heroics, no wandering off. Just keep your eyes open and try to stay out of the way." Their first few patrols were relatively quiet, involving routine checks of local villages and meetings with tribal elders. Sarah observed everything carefully, learning the rhythms of combat operations and building relationships with the local population. Her ability to remain calm under pressure and her genuine interest in helping civilians began to earn grudging respect from her teammates. The breakthrough moment came during their 4th week in country. Intelligence had identified a suspected Taliban safe house in a remote village, and their squad was assigned to investigate. The mission seemed straightforward, but as they approached the target location, everything went wrong. An improvised explosive device detonated near the lead vehicle, disabling their transportation and wounding 2 soldiers. Almost immediately, enemy fire erupted from multiple positions around the village. The squad found themselves pinned down behind a low stone wall with limited cover and no clear escape route. "We need to get Johnson and Parker out of here," Rodriguez shouted over the gunfire. Both wounded soldiers were losing blood rapidly and needed immediate medical attention. The evacuation helicopter couldn't land due to the intensity of the firefight. Someone would need to neutralize at least 2 enemy positions to create a safe landing zone. The task seemed impossible given their disadvantageous position. Sarah studied the terrain carefully, noting a series of irrigation ditches that could provide concealed movement toward the enemy positions. Without waiting for orders, she began crawling through the narrow channels, using her small size to remain hidden from enemy observers. "Martinez, get back here," Rodriguez called, but she was already too far away to hear him clearly. Moving with careful precision, Sarah worked her way around the Taliban fighter's flank. Her marksmanship training proved invaluable as she systematically engaged the enemy positions. Her first shots eliminated 2 fighters who had been preventing the squad's movement. The surprise attack from an unexpected direction created enough confusion for the rest of her squad to advance and secure the area. Within 20 minutes, the immediate threat had been neutralized and the evacuation helicopter could finally land safely. As the wounded soldiers were loaded onto the aircraft, Rodriguez approached Sarah with a mixture of amazement and respect. "Where did you learn to move like that?" he asked. "You taught me, Sergeant," she replied simply. "I just applied what I learned in training." The successful mission marked a turning point in how her unit viewed her capabilities. Word spread quickly through the base about the young soldier who had single-handedly saved her squad. Officers who had previously dismissed her began taking notice of her tactical abilities and leadership potential. Captain Brooks called her into his office the following day. "Martinez, I'm recommending you for accelerated promotion and specialized training. That kind of thinking under pressure is exactly what we need in our non-commissioned officers." Sarah felt proud, but remained focused on her responsibilities to her squad. She knew that earning respect was an ongoing process, not a one-time achievement. Each mission would bring new challenges and opportunities to prove herself. Over the following months, her reputation continued to grow. She demonstrated an uncanny ability to remain calm in chaotic situations and make quick decisions that saved lives. Her fellow soldiers began seeking her advice on tactical matters regardless of her junior rank. The transformation from doubted rookie to trusted team member was complete, but Sarah remained humble about her achievements. She understood that combat was unpredictable, and that yesterday's hero could become tomorrow's casualty without warning. Her first deployment was teaching her valuable lessons about leadership, courage, and the importance of earning trust through actions rather than words. She was beginning to understand that her small stature and youthful appearance might actually be advantages in certain situations, allowing her to move undetected and be underestimated by enemies. As her tour progressed, Sarah realized she was developing into the kind of soldier she had always aspired to become. The scared young woman who had arrived at the base months earlier had evolved into a confident and capable warrior, ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. The mountain village of Coast Province appeared peaceful in the early morning light, but Sarah had learned never to trust appearances in Afghanistan. Her squad was conducting a humanitarian mission, delivering medical supplies to a remote clinic that served several isolated communities. Staff Sergeant Martinez, as she was now known after her recent promotion, led a team of 6 soldiers through the narrow village streets. The local children ran alongside their patrol, laughing and calling out greetings in broken English. It seemed like a routine mission, the kind that reminded everyone why they were fighting. Dr. Ahmadi, the clinic director, greeted them warmly and began organizing the medical supplies. Sarah posted security around the building while her team helped unload the vehicles. The peaceful atmosphere was exactly what they needed after weeks of intense combat operations. Sergeant Martinez called Specialist Chen from his position near the village entrance. "We've got a problem. There's a crowd gathering on the main road and they look agitated." Sarah moved to Chen's position and observed the situation through her binoculars. Approximately 50 villagers were approaching, led by several men she didn't recognize. Their body language suggested hostility rather than curiosity. "Dr. Ahmadi," she called to the clinic director, "do you know those men leading the group?" The doctor's face went pale as he looked toward the approaching crowd. "Those are not villagers," he whispered urgently. "They are Taliban fighters. You must leave immediately." Sarah realized they were walking into a carefully planned trap. The humanitarian mission had been compromised, and enemy forces were moving to surround their position. Her squad was outnumbered and had limited ammunition since they hadn't expected combat. "Chen, get on the radio and call for immediate extraction," she ordered. "Rodriguez, start the vehicles. We're leaving now." But as they moved toward their transportation, explosions erupted throughout the village. The Taliban had planted improvised explosive devices along all possible escape routes, effectively trapping the American soldiers in the clinic compound. Enemy fighters began advancing from multiple directions, using civilian shields to complicate any defensive response. Sarah faced an impossible situation with no good options and innocent lives at stake. "Everyone inside the clinic," she commanded. "We'll make our stand here and wait for backup." The building offered limited protection, but it was better than being caught in the open. Sarah positioned her soldiers at windows and doorways while Dr. Ahmadi and several patients huddled in the interior rooms. The firefight began in earnest as Taliban forces launched a coordinated assault on their position. Sarah moved constantly between firing positions, coordinating her squad's defense and calling in their location to headquarters. During the second hour of fighting, she noticed smoke beginning to fill the building. The enemy had started fires to force them out of their defensive positions. The situation was becoming desperate. "Sergeant, the smoke is getting too thick," reported Corporal Williams. "We need to evacuate the civilians before they suffocate." Sarah realized she had to make a choice between tactical advantage and protecting innocent lives. Without hesitation, she decided to risk everything to save the clinic staff and patients. "Williams, take 3 men and get the civilians out through the back entrance," she ordered. Chen and I will provide covering fire from the front. As her soldiers began evacuating the building, Sarah exposed herself to enemy fire to draw attention away from the escaping civilians. She moved from window to window, engaging Taliban fighters and creating enough distraction to allow the evacuation to succeed. A rocket-propelled grenade struck the wall near her position, and the explosion threw her across the room. Shrapnel from the blast tore into her left arm and shoulder, causing severe bleeding and immediate pain. Despite her wounds, Sarah continued fighting. She applied a field dressing to her arm with one hand while maintaining fire on enemy positions with the other. Her determination to protect her squad and the civilians kept her focused despite the pain. "Sergeant, you're hit bad," Chen observed as he moved to her position. "Let me treat those wounds." "Not until everyone else is safe," Sarah replied grimly. "Keep firing and watch the eastern approach." The battle continued for another hour before attack helicopters finally arrived to provide air support. The Taliban fighters melted away into the mountains as quickly as they had appeared, leaving behind a damaged clinic and several American heroes. Medical personnel treated Sarah's wounds at the scene before evacuating her to the base hospital. The shrapnel had caused significant damage, but doctors assured her that she would make a full recovery with proper treatment and rehabilitation. Colonel Harrison visited her in the hospital the following day to present her with the Purple Heart medal. "Martinez, your actions saved not only your squad, but also a dozen innocent civilians," he said solemnly. "This medal represents the sacrifice you made for others." Sarah accepted the honor humbly, knowing that many soldiers had made far greater sacrifices. Her wounds would heal, but the experience had taught her valuable lessons about leadership under the most extreme circumstances. The local village elders visited her before she was evacuated for additional treatment. Dr. Ahmadi spoke for the group, thanking her for risking her life to protect their community. "You are small in body but giant in heart," he said through an interpreter. "Our children will remember your courage for generations." As Sarah recovered from her injuries, she reflected on how much she had changed since arriving in Afghanistan. The young woman who had once been dismissed as too inexperienced had now proven herself in the crucible of combat. Her first Purple Heart marked not an end, but a beginning. She was developing a reputation as a soldier who would never abandon her mission or her people, regardless of personal cost. This dedication would define the rest of her remarkable military career. 3 years after her first deployment, Sergeant First Class Sarah Martinez returned to combat, this time in Iraq as part of the drawdown operations. Her reputation had preceded her to the new unit, and younger soldiers looked up to her with genuine admiration. The scared recruit from Chicago had evolved into a seasoned non-commissioned officer with real combat experience. Captain Reynolds, her new commanding officer, briefed her on their mission. "Martinez, your squad will be responsible for training Iraqi security forces and conducting joint operations in Anbar province. It's different from Afghanistan, but no less dangerous." Sarah nodded, understanding the complexity of working with local forces who might have divided loyalties. Building trust would be essential, but her previous experience with civilian populations had prepared her for the challenge. Her squad consisted of both veterans and new soldiers, creating an interesting dynamic. She found herself mentoring troops who reminded her of herself years earlier, full of determination, but lacking practical experience. Private Jackson, barely 18 years old, reminded her most of her younger self. Small in stature and eager, to prove himself he often took unnecessary risks to impress his teammates. Sarah recognized the dangerous combination of youth and bravado that could get soldiers killed. "Jackson, come here," she called after watching him volunteer for every dangerous assignment during their first week. "Walk with me." As they patrolled the quiet streets of their assigned sector, Sarah shared some hard-earned wisdom. "I know you want to prove yourself, and I respect that. But getting yourself killed doesn't help anyone. Smart soldiers live to fight another day." Jackson listened intently, clearly hungry for guidance from someone he respected. "Sergeant, do you know when to take risks and when to play it safe?" "Experience teaches you that every situation is different," Sarah replied. "The key is making calculated decisions based on the mission and your responsibility to your team." Heroics without Purpose: just create more casualties. Their conversation was interrupted by an urgent radio call. Intelligence had identified a suspected bomb-making facility in their patrol area, and higher command wanted immediate investigation. Sarah knew this kind of operation could easily become a deadly trap. As they approached the suspected building, Sarah noticed several inconsistencies that troubled her. The neighborhood was unusually quiet, with no civilians visible on the normally busy streets. Windows in nearby buildings were closed despite the afternoon heat. "Something's not right here," she whispered to her squad. "This feels like an ambush." Before anyone could respond, explosions erupted around their position. A massive improvised explosive device detonated beneath their lead vehicle, flipping it completely over and trapping 2 soldiers inside. Simultaneously, enemy fighters opened fire from concealed positions in surrounding buildings. Sarah immediately took charge of the chaotic situation. "Johnson, get those men out of the vehicle. Patterson, call for medical evacuation. Everyone else, find cover and return fire." The overturned vehicle was leaking fuel and could explode at any moment. Sarah ran directly toward it, ignoring the enemy bullet striking the ground around her. She and Johnson worked desperately to extract their trapped teammates while under continuous fire. An enemy sniper had positioned himself to prevent anyone from reaching the vehicle. Sarah spotted his muzzle flash from a third-story window and realized someone would need to neutralize him before the rescue could continue. Without hesitation, she sprinted across open ground toward the building, drawing the sniper's attention away from her soldiers. The enemy fighter tracked her movement, but Sarah's speed and unpredictable path made her a difficult target. She reached the building and found a way inside through a damaged rear entrance. Moving quietly through the structure, she located the sniper's position and eliminated the threat with precise shots from her rifle. With the immediate danger neutralized, Sarah's squad was able to complete the rescue operation. Both trapped soldiers were alive but seriously injured. The medical evacuation helicopter arrived within minutes, thanks to the swift action of her team. During the firefight, Sarah had been struck by shrapnel from a grenade explosion, earning her second Purple Heart. This time, the wounds were more serious, requiring surgery to remove metal fragments from her back and legs. While recovering in the hospital, Sarah received an unexpected visitor. General Morrison, the commanding officer for the entire region, came to personally thank her for her leadership during the ambush. "Martinez, I've been following your career since Afghanistan," he said. "Your actions consistently demonstrate the kind of leadership we need at higher levels. I'm recommending you for officer candidate school." Sarah was honored but uncertain about accepting such a significant change in her career path. She had always been a non-commissioned officer, working directly with soldiers rather than managing from behind a desk. "Sir, I appreciate the opportunity, but I'm not sure I want to leave the field," she replied honestly. General Morrison smiled knowingly. "The Army needs officers who understand what it means to lead from the front. Your experience gives you credibility that can't be taught in a classroom." After much consideration, Sarah accepted the recommendation and began the process of becoming a commissioned officer. The transition was challenging, requiring her to learn new skills while maintaining her hands-on leadership style. Officer candidate school pushed her in different ways than enlisted training had. She was expected to think strategically rather than just tactically, considering broader implications of military operations and their effects on civilian populations. Her fellow candidates included college graduates and experienced non-commissioned officers like herself. Some initially questioned whether someone with her background could adapt to the increased responsibilities of leadership. Sarah proved them wrong through consistent performance and innovative thinking. Her practical experience gave her insights that textbook learning couldn't provide. She graduated near the top of her class and was commissioned as a second lieutenant. Her first assignment as an officer took her back to Afghanistan for a third deployment, this time in command of a full platoon. The young woman who had once been dismissed as too small and inexperienced was now responsible for the lives of 40 soldiers. The transition from enlisted soldier to officer presented new challenges, but Sarah's authentic leadership style earned respect from subordinates and superiors alike. She never forgot where she came from or the lessons learned during her journey from private to lieutenant. Her second Purple Heart represented not just personal sacrifice, but also her growing reputation as a leader who would never ask her soldiers to take risks she wouldn't take herself. Lieutenant Sarah Martinez stood at the edge of the helicopter landing zone in eastern Afghanistan, watching her platoon prepare for what intelligence described as their most dangerous mission yet. As a newly promoted officer with 2 Purple Hearts, already earned, she had volunteered her unit for a high-risk operation that others had declined. A Taliban commander known as the Ghost had been orchestrating attacks throughout the region for over 2 years. Intelligence finally pinpointed his location in a heavily fortified compound, deep in hostile territory. The mission was to capture or eliminate him before he could escape again. Major Collins, the battalion commander, had serious reservations about assigning such a critical operation to a relatively inexperienced officer. "Martinez, this isn't a routine patrol. You'll be operating 40 miles from the nearest support, in terrain controlled entirely by enemy forces." Sarah studied the mission briefings carefully, analyzing every detail of the intelligence reports. The compound was built into a mountainside, with multiple escape routes and excellent defensive positions. Any direct assault would likely result in heavy casualties. "Sir, I believe a small, highly mobile team could succeed where a larger force might fail," she proposed. "The element of surprise is our only real advantage here." After extensive planning sessions, Sarah was authorized to proceed with a modified version of the mission. She would take only 12 of her best soldiers, infiltrating on foot under cover of darkness and striking before the enemy could organize a defense. The team included Staff Sergeant Rodriguez, who had served with Sarah since her days as an enlisted soldier. His experience and loyalty made him an invaluable second-in-command for the dangerous operation. "Ma'am, the men trust you completely," Rodriguez told her as they conducted final equipment checks. "We'll follow you anywhere. But this mission has everyone nervous." Sarah understood their concerns. The operation required everything to go perfectly with no margin for error. One mistake could result in the entire team being killed or captured in enemy territory. They inserted by helicopter 20 miles from the target, then moved on foot through treacherous mountain terrain for 8 hours. Sarah navigated using night vision equipment and GPS coordinates, leading her team through valleys and ridges that had seen fighting for decades. As dawn approached, they reached the observation point overlooking the target compound. Through her binoculars, Sarah could see guards patrolling the perimeter and vehicles parked in a central courtyard. Intelligence reports appeared accurate about the location's significance. Rodriguez positioned the team in 3 groups around the compound. She whispered, "Wait for my signal before engaging. Remember, we need the primary target alive if possible." The assault began at exactly 0530 hours with coordinated attacks on the guard positions. Sarah's team moved with precision, neutralizing sentries before they could raise an alarm. The element of surprise worked perfectly for the first few minutes. However, as they breached the main building, enemy fighters emerged from hidden positions throughout the compound. The Taliban had anticipated an attack and prepared an elaborate ambush of their own. "It's a trap," Rodriguez called over the radio as automatic weapons fire erupted from multiple directions. "We're surrounded." Sarah realized they had walked into a carefully prepared kill zone. The intelligence about the target's location had been accurate, but enemy forces had used it as bait to lure American forces into an impossible situation. Fighting raged throughout the compound as her team struggled to maintain their positions against overwhelming odds. Several soldiers were wounded in the initial moments of the firefight, and their ammunition was running dangerously low. "Ma'am, we need to call for extraction," Rodriguez urged as bullets struck the wall near their position. "We can't hold this much longer." But Sarah had spotted movement in a building that matched the description of where the high-value target was supposedly located. Despite the desperate tactical situation, she saw an opportunity to complete at least part of their mission. "Rodriguez, take half the team and secure the landing zone for extraction," she ordered. "I'm going after the primary target with the others." "Lieutenant, that's suicide," Rodriguez protested. "The whole compound is crawling with enemy fighters." Sarah knew the risks, but she also understood that opportunities to capture such important targets were rare. Against all tactical wisdom, she decided to press forward with her mission while her soldiers fell back to defensible positions. Moving with 4 volunteers, Sarah fought her way toward the target building. Enemy fighters contested every room, but her team's superior training and equipment gradually overwhelmed the defenders. In the final room, they found not the Taliban commander, but a cache of intelligence documents and communication equipment. The real prize wasn't a person, but information that could save countless lives. As Sarah secured the intelligence materials, an explosion rocked the building. Enemy fighters had detonated charges to collapse part of the structure, trapping her. Team inside the rubble. Rodriguez and the extraction team fought desperately to reach their location, but debris blocked all access routes. The situation appeared hopeless as enemy reinforcements continued arriving at the compound. Sarah found herself buried under concrete blocks, her legs trapped and her body battered by the blast. Despite severe injuries, she continued coordinating her team's efforts to escape the collapsed building. "Ma'am, I can see daylight through the debris," reported Specialist Chen. "If we can move these blocks, we might be able to dig our way out." Working with incredible determination despite their injuries, the trapped soldiers slowly cleared a path to freedom. Sarah's leadership kept them focused and motivated even as their situation seemed impossible. After 3 hours of desperate work, they finally broke through to open air. Rodriguez had maintained a defensive perimeter around the building, fighting off repeated enemy attacks while waiting for his commander to emerge. The helicopter extraction arrived just as Sarah's team escaped from the rubble. She had sustained multiple injuries during the collapse, earning her 3rd Purple Heart, but the intelligence they recovered proved invaluable to future operations. During her recovery, Sarah learned that the documents captured during the mission had led to the disruption of a major terrorist network. Her decision to press forward despite impossible odds had ultimately saved many lives. The mission established her reputation as an officer willing to take extraordinary risks for mission success, but it also demonstrated the heavy personal cost of such dedication. Captain Sarah Martinez walked carefully across the parade ground at Fort Campbell, her movement still showing the effects of multiple combat injuries. At 28, she moved like someone much older, the physical toll of 5 deployments evident in every step. Yet her eyes still burned with the same determination that had carried her through basic training nearly a decade earlier. Today marked a bittersweet milestone in her military career. After receiving her 4th and 5th Purple Hearts during recent operations in Syria, military doctors had declared her unfit for continued combat duty. The small woman who had defied every expectation now faced the end of her frontline service. General Patterson, the post commander, had summoned her to discuss her future options. As she entered his office, Sarah noticed the walls covered with photographs of distinguished officers who had served with honor. Soon, her own picture would join that gallery. "Captain Martinez, your medical profile makes it clear that continued combat operations would pose unacceptable risks to your health," General Patterson began solemnly. "However, your experience and leadership abilities make you too valuable to lose to the Army." Sarah had expected this conversation for months. Her most recent injuries, sustained while evacuating wounded soldiers under heavy fire, had resulted in permanent damage to her spine and left leg. The doctors had been frank about her limitations. "Sir, I understand the medical realities," she replied quietly. "My only concern is that I remain useful to the service and the soldiers who will continue the mission." General Patterson smiled, recognizing the selfless attitude that had made her legendary among both officers and enlisted personnel. "Sarah, I'm offering you command of the Army's new Combat Leadership Institute. You would be responsible for training the next generation of officers and non-commissioned officers." The assignment represented a significant honor, but Sarah felt conflicted about leaving active combat operations. Her entire identity had been built around leading soldiers in dangerous situations, and the thought of a desk job troubled her. "General, I appreciate the confidence you're showing in me," she said carefully, "but I'm not sure I'm ready to become a classroom instructor." "This isn't about classroom instruction," General Patterson clarified. "We want you to develop realistic training programs based on your combat experience. Young officers need to learn from someone who has actually faced the challenges they'll encounter." Over the following weeks, Sarah wrestled with the decision while completing her recovery from surgery Visitors streamed through her hospital room, including soldiers she had served with throughout her career and family members who had worried about her for years. Rodriguez, now a sergeant major, visited regularly and helped her think through the decision. "Ma'am, you've already proven everything there is to prove in combat. Maybe it's time to think about how you can help others achieve what you've achieved." Sarah's mother, now in her 60s, had aged considerably during her daughter's military career. The constant worry about Sarah's safety had taken its toll, and she quietly hoped her daughter would accept a safer assignment. "Mija, you've done more than enough," her mother said during one visit. "Maybe now you can help other young soldiers without putting yourself in danger every day." The decision became clearer when Sarah received a letter from Private Jackson, the young soldier she had mentored in Iraq. Now a sergeant himself, he wrote about how her leadership had shaped his own approach to military service. Sergeant Martinez, his letter read, "You taught me that real leadership means taking care of your people, not just completing missions. I've tried to pass that lesson on to the soldiers I work with now. Thank you for showing me what right looks like." Reading Jackson's words, Sarah realized that her influence could extend far beyond her own direct service. Teaching others could multiply her impact on the Army and the soldiers who would face future conflicts. She accepted the assignment to the Combat Leadership Institute and threw herself into developing training programs with the same intensity she had brought to combat operations. Her courses quickly gained reputation as the most realistic and valuable leadership training in the military. Young officers who had heard stories about Captain Martinez found themselves learning from the legend herself. Her teaching style combined practical experience with genuine care for student development, creating an environment where future leaders could grow and learn. "Leadership isn't about rank or position," she would tell each new class. "It's about taking responsibility for the people under your command and making decisions that serve something bigger than yourself." The institute became a pilgrimage site for military leaders from around the world who wanted to learn from someone who had proven herself in the crucible of combat. Sarah's small frame and quiet manner often surprised visitors who expected someone more imposing. Her influence extended beyond military circles as well. She began speaking at universities and leadership conferences, sharing lessons about courage, perseverance, and service. Audiences were captivated by stories of the young woman who had overcome every obstacle through determination and character. Awards and recognition followed, including the Distinguished Service Cross and eventual promotion to Major. Sarah accepted each honor graciously but remained focused on her teaching mission and the development of future military leaders. Years later, as she prepared for retirement, Sarah reflected on her remarkable journey from doubted recruit to legendary officer. The 5 Purple Hearts displayed in her office told only part of the story of a career defined by service and sacrifice. Students continued seeking her mentorship even after her retirement, and her influence on military leadership doctrine would be felt for generations. The young woman who had been told she was too small and inexperienced had become one of the most respected figures in military history. Sarah Martinez had proven that greatness comes not from physical attributes or initial advantages, but from an unwavering commitment to excellence and service to others. Her legacy would inspire countless future leaders to push beyond perceived limitations and achieve extraordinary things. The legend that began in a Chicago recruitment office had grown into something far greater than anyone could have imagined, touching lives and changing the military forever.